I'd never been opposed to meeting people online. These days, it's the norm, and honestly, I didn't have much time for anything else. Work, daily routines, and the occasional get-togethers with friends left little room for chance encounters in real life. So, when I decided to create a profile on a popular dating platform, I did it without hesitation. He messaged me first. His note wasn't anything extraordinary, but it had something that caught my attention. It was short, but far from cliché. "Hi, I noticed your profile and thought you might be into reading. What's on your reading list right now?" It stood out because most people just sent something generic like, "Hey, how are you?" I replied. And that's how it all began. From the start, our conversations flowed effortlessly. He didn't ask weird questions or dive into anything too personal too soon. Everything felt natural, as if we'd known each other for years. We talked about everything: books, movies, and even dream destinations. Sometimes our chats stretched well past midnight. It became a part of my day, a part of my life. I learned that he lived in another city, far from mine. But strangely, that didn't scare me. He felt genuine, and the distance didn't seem like a barrier. After a few weeks of chatting, he suggested a phone call. I was nervous. A person's voice can reveal so much, and I worried I might be disappointed. But the moment he spoke, I felt a wave of calm. His voice was warm, deep, and inviting. Our calls became regular and lasted for hours. I began to miss him when he was busy and couldn't talk. He was becoming a part of my life, even from afar. We talked about everything: work, dreams, little things that made us happy or sad. His care was evident in every word, and I realized I was growing attached to him. 3 months into our connection, he suggested we meet in person. He offered to visit me if I was okay with it. Of course, I agreed. I wanted to see him face to face, to confirm he was just as I'd imagined. When he arrived, my nerves were harder to control than I expected. Standing in the airport, fixing my hair, I ran through countless scenarios in my head, and then I saw him. His smile was so genuine that all my worries melted away. He walked up, hugged me, and it felt so natural, as if we'd been doing this for years. We spent a few unforgettable days together, some of the best in my life. He was attentive, thoughtful, and sincere. We strolled through parks, ate ice cream on benches, and shared dreams about life. It was all so simple, yet deeply meaningful. With him, I felt safe. I felt happy. When he left, the days that followed were difficult. I missed him, counting the moments until our next call. Our bond only grew stronger. I started imagining a future where we were more than just two people connected through screens. As our relationship deepened, we talked every day, and I couldn't imagine my life without him anymore. Not long ago, we'd been strangers, yet now he was integral to my world. Then something changed. I began feeling off: constant fatigue, light nausea, mood swings. At first, I blamed stress or overwork, but as the days passed and nothing improved, I started suspecting something else. I bought a test. That morning, he called, as he often did, to wish me a good day. I tried to act normal, but inside, I was a storm of emotions. After we hung up, I went to the bathroom and took the test. 2 lines. I was stunned, my heart pounding as my mind raced. Pregnancy? It wasn't something I had planned. Of course, I knew it was a possibility, but I was still in shock. I couldn't keep it from him. That evening, when we called, I told him, "We need to talk." I'll never forget how his voice changed when he heard those words. He immediately grew concerned, asking what was wrong. It took me a while to find the courage, but eventually, I said it. "I'm pregnant." On the other end of the line, there was silence. The longest few seconds of my life stretched before me. I had already begun bracing for the worst when he finally spoke. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I replied, doing my best to remain calm. I took a test. 2 lines. His reaction caught me off guard. He didn't yell, didn't blame me. Instead, he said, "We'll figure it out. Everything will be okay." His confidence disarmed me. While I wasn't sure I was ready for this, he seemed to have already made up his mind. He told me he wanted to be with me, that he would move to my city, and that we should get married. At first, I didn't know what to say. It was all so sudden, but at the same time, I felt a wave of relief. He didn't abandon me, didn't run away. Instead, he offered a solution. A few weeks later, he flew back, this time with a different energy. We started planning our new life together. It wasn't easy. We both understood that everything was about to change. I could see his nervousness, even though he tried to hide it. The move, a new job, a baby on the way, it was an enormous responsibility. We got married in a modest ceremony. Only our closest loved ones were there. I didn't want a big celebration, and he supported me in that. We simply signed the paperwork, had lunch with our families, and called it a day. But in that moment, I felt like we had become a team. After the wedding, he moved in with me. It was a new chapter in our lives. Living together, adjusting to each other's routines, was a first for me. At first, it felt strange. His belongings scattered around my home, his habits that occasionally irritated me. But we learned to compromise, and it brought us closer. He found a job with a small construction firm. Each morning, he left early and returned in the evening, tired but satisfied. I loved seeing him like that, engaged in his work, confident in his abilities. I, on the other hand, focused on my pregnancy. It was a new and strange experience, filled with both joy and apprehension. I read books, explored forums, and consulted with doctors. Fortunately, everything was progressing smoothly. I didn't suffer from severe nausea, and while mood swings came and went, they weren't overwhelming. I was grateful for how things were unfolding. Every evening, we shared dinner together. It became our little ritual. He would tell me about his projects at work and how his colleagues loved playing practical jokes on one another. I'd share my thoughts about baby supplies and ideas for decorating the nursery. He was so thoughtful. He often urged me to rest, insisting he'd take care of the chores, cleaning, cooking, grocery shopping. On days when I was particularly tired, he'd bring me tea with honey and tell me not to worry, to save my strength. His kindness reassured me that I wasn't alone, that he was truly there for me. We talked about the future, about how we'd raise our child, how we'd try to give them the best life possible. Sometimes he joked about hoping for a boy so he could teach him to play soccer and build things in the garage. I'd laugh and tease back. And what if it's a girl? His answer was always the same. Then we'll be building dollhouses. Those moments felt perfect. It seemed like we had everything: love, understanding, a shared vision of the future. I felt happy and confident that I'd made the right decision in marrying him. But calm can be deceiving. We often believe everything is fine, until something happens that shatters the illusion. One evening, while he was in the shower, he left his phone on the kitchen counter. I had never gone through his personal things, never read his messages, never checked his calls. I didn't have a reason to. But at that moment, I noticed the phone light up with a new message. It was a reflex, really. The screen lit up, and my eyes caught the notification. The message was from someone whose name I didn't recognize. It was a simple sentence: "I miss you." My heart skipped a beat. I didn't know what to do. At first, I thought about just turning away, pretending I hadn't seen anything. But something inside me, a quiet, persistent voice, pushed me to pick up the phone. I can't explain why I did it. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was fear of finding out something I didn't want to know. I unlocked the phone. I knew the password. Neither of us had ever hidden them from each other. The conversation opened immediately. The sender's name meant nothing to me, but her messages. They felt too personal, too warm to be casual. I scrolled up, reading a few earlier exchanges. "Do you remember walking along the beach? That was the best summer of my life. You're still the same as ever. I hope you find time to see me." The messages were from weeks ago, but their tone told me this wasn't a distant memory. Their conversation was ongoing, and then my eyes landed on his response. "I miss you too. You were an important part of my life." At that moment, I heard the water shut off in the bathroom. The phone was still in my hands. I quickly closed the chat and put it back on the counter, as if nothing had happened. But inside, everything had changed. When he walked out, I forced myself to act normal. He didn't seem to notice anything. He smiled, kissed me on the forehead, and headed to the bedroom. I stayed in the kitchen, frozen, consumed by a storm of thoughts. Who was this woman? Why was she saying she missed him? And why was he saying it back? The next morning, I woke up with a heavy heart. For a moment, I thought what I'd seen the night before had been a bad dream, but the memory of that conversation came flooding back. I felt like a traitor. Was it even right to read someone else's messages, even if that someone was my husband? But those few moments I'd spent holding his phone had changed the way I saw everything. I tried to convince myself it didn't mean anything. Maybe she was just someone from his past, reaching out of nostalgia. Maybe his response was just politeness. But deep down, something told me this wasn't so simple. From that point on, I began noticing things I'd overlooked before. He started staying late at work more often. His phone, which he used to leave lying around, now always seemed to be face down. And though he was still attentive and caring, there were moments when his gaze drifted, as if he wasn't fully present. A few days later, I saw his phone again, left unattended on the couch while he ran to the store. The temptation to look was unbearable. With trembling hands, I unlocked it and went straight to the conversation. Her name was Lily. That was the first thing I learned. I began reading everything, scrolling back, piecing together their story. "How are you? I miss you. I hope you're doing okay. I've been thinking about you. Do you remember our trip?" Every word felt like a dagger. She wasn't just a random acquaintance or an old coworker. She was someone who had meant something to him. And then I found a message that made me stop cold. "When are you free? I could fly to Spain if you're still up for meeting." Spain. I read it over and over, trying to make sense of it. Scrolling further, I saw his reply. "Let's plan it. I'll try to make time once things settle down." My world collapsed. This wasn't just a casual exchange. They were planning to meet. It was more than I could process in that moment. I closed the phone and put it back where I'd found it. But the rest of the day, I couldn't concentrate. My mind was racing with questions. Who was she? Why was he talking to her? And most importantly, why hadn't he told me? I spent hours debating whether I should confront him. But how? How could I bring it up without admitting I'd gone through his phone? And even if I did, what would I say? Would he deny everything, or would he tell me the truth? These thoughts wouldn't leave me alone. A few days later, while he was in the shower again, I reached for his phone. I couldn't stop myself. It had become an obsession, a compulsion I couldn't resist. The more I read, the clearer it became that Lily was his former love. They had been together for 10 years before he met me. I miss those days. Do you remember how we used to walk through the city at night? You were everything to me. I always hoped we'd find a way to fix things. His replies were just as gut-wrenching, as though time hadn't changed anything between them. You'll always be special to me. Those 10 years meant so much. Each word felt like a dagger. How could he do this? Wasn't I his wife? Weren't we building a life together? Over time, I discovered more. When he claimed to be traveling for work, there were times he was flying to see her. They had met up. The pain grew unbearable. I began noticing subtle changes in his behavior. He was quieter, more withdrawn, lost in his thoughts. Yet, he still cared for me, still told me he loved me. I didn't know what was real anymore, what was truth, and what was a carefully constructed facade. Every day, I felt the weight of my suspicions press down on me. My mind was filled with questions and doubts, leaving no room for anything else. I imagined what it would be like to confront him, to sit him down and say, "I know everything." How would he react? Would he confess, deny, beg for forgiveness, or leave for her without a second thought? My greatest fear wasn't his betrayal. It was the possibility of him leaving me and our unborn child behind. I grew up without a father. He left when I was very young, and my mother carried the weight of everything alone. I remember her crying at night, thinking I couldn't hear. I remember her exhaustion, masked by forced smiles for my sake. I knew all too well what it felt like to grow up without a father's love. I didn't want that for my child. I wanted them to grow up in a home with both parents, surrounded by love and security. I wanted them to feel cherished. But now I was faced with a choice. How could I preserve our family when I knew my husband had betrayed me? How could I ever trust him again when his heart seemed to belong to someone else? Sometimes I thought I should just confront him, lay everything bare. But each time I mustered the courage, something held me back. Fear. Fear of the irreversible consequences. What if he chose her? What if he left, abandoning me and our child? Could I raise our baby alone, give them everything they deserved? I tried to convince myself it was all just a mistake, that he no longer saw her, and their messages were nothing more than fleeting nostalgia. But the facts told a different story. Every time he mentioned a work trip, I couldn't help but wonder, was it truly for business, or was it another rendezvous with Lily? I couldn't ask him outright. That would mean admitting I had gone through his phone. I didn't want to seem suspicious or insecure. Yet, with each passing day, my doubts consumed me. Those days were the hardest of my life. I felt lost, untethered. I couldn't tell anyone, not even those closest to me. What could they possibly advise? To leave him? To end everything? But I couldn't simply walk away from our marriage. I thought of our unborn child, of the life we were supposed to create together. How would I explain to them why their father wasn't with us anymore? I dreaded becoming like my own mother, no matter how strong she had been. With every passing day, my emotions grew more turbulent, tearing me apart from within and leaving me feeling hollow and powerless. I tried to pretend nothing had happened, to act as though I was unaware of the messages, blind to the fact that he still thought of her. But beneath the surface, I was boiling over. Sometimes I envisioned the moment I would confront him. I'd look him in the eye and say, "I know about Lily. I know you've been messaging her. I know you've seen her." But as soon as I pictured his reaction, all my resolve crumbled. What if he left immediately? What if he admitted he never stopped loving her? Or worse, what if he said that our relationship had been a mistake all along? These thoughts paralyzed me. I had no idea how to move forward. Every night, I fell asleep with this weight pressing on my heart. When he lay down beside me, I would look at him, and my emotions tore me apart. On one hand, I loved him. I held on to everything that had brought us together. The warm moments, his care, the life we were building. On the other hand, I couldn't stop thinking about his betrayal. How can I trust him when he keeps his feelings for another woman hidden from me? How can I stay with him, knowing that part of his mind, part of his heart, still belongs to her? At the same time, I couldn't stop thinking about our child. I had already started to feel the baby's movements, and I would imagine what they might be like, who they might become. And every time I thought about divorce, fear gripped me. I didn't want my child to grow up without a father. Was I just too afraid of being alone? Afraid of following the same path my mother had? Or was it truly important to keep this family together for the sake of our child? But where do I fit into this family? Don't my feelings matter? Am I supposed to sacrifice my happiness for a future that might never even be what I hope for? These questions haunted me every single day. I tried to find answers, but the more I thought about it, the more lost I became. And now, here I am, writing this post. I'm hoping to hear from others. Should I fight to keep this family together, knowing about his betrayal? Should I try to make this relationship work for the sake of our child? Or would it be better to leave, to start over, even if it's hard and painful? I don't know what to do. I'm terrified of making the wrong decision, but I also can't keep living in this limbo. I'm asking you, whoever reads my story, to help me. Tell me, what would you do in my place?